Sometimes it's good to be creative, but sometimes it may be best to just imitate what you hear other people doing. Here's the thing. Even if you learn vocabulary, you learn the endings, you learn how verbs work in Russian, but you'll still find that Russian often phrases things in a very different way from English, or whatever your native language might be. One of the first times you'll notice this may be for expressing possession. In English, we use a verb, have, with a direct object. I have a ticket. In Russian, we'll say literally, by me there is ticket. У меня есть билет. Another example is when you express feelings, physical or emotional. In English, you describe yourself. I'm cold, I'm bored, and I'm thirsty. In Russian, though, we'll often use impersonal expressions with the dative. Мне холодно, мне скучно. And sometimes an impersonal expression with a form of the verb to want. Пить хочется. Here's one last interesting example. A student once wrote in a composition, Я желаю, я делал. I stared at this for almost a full minute with no idea what he meant, until I translated it back to English, word for word. I wish I did. And with the context of the previous sentence, I don't have a car, I wish I did, it finally made sense. In English, at least. So why couldn't I understand the Russian? Well, there's actually two interesting issues here. First of all, wish is used in slightly different meanings in English, but the Russian желать does not match all of those. Желать can mean to wish in the sense of wanting something. Мы не желаем даже комментировать подобные инсинуации. And we can use it for wishing someone well. Желаю всего самого хорошего. But we don't really use желать to express a desire for something you don't have, or something that didn't or won't happen, like this. He wished he had gone with us. Wishing here expresses a kind of regret, so we could use жалеть or пожалеть, literally, to regret. Он пожалел, что не поехал с нами. Or, from the same root, жаль. Жаль, что его там не было. But when we're talking about something that's not true, an unreal condition, we can often see expressions with бы as well. Ой, лучше бы я этого не видел. Очень хотелось бы. And this last option brings us back to the second really interesting question, that we don't use the verb делать in Russian in the same ways as to do in English. In this case, the student took the perfectly normal English way of using do as a substitute and brought it word by word into Russian, where it just sounded really strange. So there were two types of issues here, one of vocabulary and one of usage. And this is why good textbooks and good teachers encourage you to use what you know. When you talk or write, avoid translating word by word from your native language. Instead, use expressions and structures that you've heard Russians use as much as possible. If you imitate what you've heard, that makes it more likely that your Russian will feel natural to the Russian ear. And if you really need to express something that you haven't heard or seen yet, you can always try, but be ready to be corrected, or just have a different phrasing suggested, even if you got your endings right. There's really nothing wrong with that. It's all part of the process of learning to think in a different language, which I think is one of the most fascinating parts of this whole business. So keep in mind that old saying, подражание – высшая форма лести. And it's good advice for language learning too.